let's just get this started. So we're starting off with the leader Crocodile. Crocodile, pretty good. So if you don't know, he's a 5k, 5 life, and his ability is activate main once per turn. You Dawn -4, so you just basically just get rid of 4 Dawn, and then you can return 1 character with a cost of 5 or less to the owner's hand. In most Crocodile builds, I see that the decks that they're playing, it's not really the best suited for it. It's a little bit weak. A lot of people tend to opt for Doflamingo, but I think once you guys see the kind of deck we're going for, the synergy will start becoming a lot more apparent. So here we're just going to start off with the Heart and Soul of the deck, probably the best card. We are running 4 copies of OPO1 Pacifista. So this card is really strong. It's a 4-cost 5k body. Obviously 5k, meaning you can hit the opponent's life. And so you just kind of play this card, you hit in, and then bam. You know, it's just, you instantly have enough for life. It's a 4-cost, so you could even play 2 of these per turn and still have Dawn left over to attach to and swing for 7, right? So really, really powerful offensive threat. Pacifista has a really strong stat line. Really, really the core of the deck here. So next up, what we have is we have some strong offense with Pacifista, but we also are playing Pacifista to offer some solid defense as well. So Pacifista, if you did not know, is a blocker, meaning that it's able to kind of tank a hit, right? And so you'll notice that the deck doesn't really have too many counters, but that's okay because we're running the blocker Pacifistas, and counters are a little bit weak in comparison to blockers anyway. If someone swings for, you know, a big number in this game that comes up is 12k, 10 cost Kaido, 12k. Kid, usually at the end of the game, he's swinging for 12k twice. You need a lot of counter in your hand to block against an attack like that. But blockers, it doesn't matter if they have 6k or 30k, a blocker will tank the hit, right? So blocker, really, really powerful, really, really valuable. And so we're playing 4 Pacifista as well. Next up, we're playing 4 Sentomaru. So you need some consistency in your deck, right? You can't just kind of hard draw Pacifista or Pacifista because, like, what are you going to do, right? It's like you kind of need something to kind of get there. And the other thing about Sentomaru is that it's only a 3-cost, so you can play it on curve a little bit sooner than Pacifista, which is really useful. Like, you'll notice cards like Bonnie and Momonosuke and Nami are also lower cost cards so that they can find the big heavy hitters more easily. Sentomaru, no exception to that. So Sentomaru's effect actually is Dawn X1, activate main once per turn. You can rest 2, and then you basically can just play a Pacifista from your deck with a cost of 4 or less. Of course, Pacifista is a 4-cost, as well as Pacifista being a 4-cost. And so Sentomaru is actually really good at getting it directly from the deck. A lot of searchers like Nami and Momonosuke only really add the card to your hand, right? But Sentomaru will play it directly for you. So you're essentially getting a Pacifista on curve for only 3 costs. Honestly, Sentomaru really strong, and the Dawn X1 attached to Sentomaru makes it a 5k. So really, it's a really convenient number. You're actually saving a Dawn on Pacifista, and there's a counter on Sentomaru, but when you have a payoff like Pacifista that you're getting off of the Sentomaru, I think it's usually better to keep the Sentomaru so that you can end up playing the Pacifista anyway. So next up, so consistency is, for the most part, pretty good. We don't really have any other strong Pacifista searchers, unfortunately. However, you have to kind of keep in mind the way that this game works, and the way a lot of card games work, is that you are not necessarily looking for specific cards. Like, it's, yeah, we're looking for Pacifista, but the reason is because Pacifista is a broken card, right? It's so strong. And so what you need to do is, you don't necessarily need something that is the same as Pacifista, right? Like in green, they run Nekomamushi and Izo, which are not the same card, but they do approximately the same thing, right? 3k body, has a counter, rests things on the board that are 3 or less or 4 or less. There's a lot of overlap, right? And so you can also increase consistency in your deck by also running similar cards that do almost the same thing, but effectively are accomplishing a similar goal, right? And so we are here playing 4 copies of Pacifista. Like I said, it's not necessarily as good as Pacifista per se, but it's close enough to where I think that it's reasonable to play, and it kind of boosts the consistency, not necessarily of seeing Pacifista, but Pacifista ends up actually boosting the consistency of the strategy, right? And so it's going to be a really strong, important card. It's kind of like a really good plan B. Pacifista is not as good as Pacifista, but it's so close that like you'll end up winning the game regardless. If you see Pacifista, you're definitely winning the game, and if you see Pacifista, you're like probably winning the game. It's good enough. You just have it because like you can't run more Sentomaru than you can. It's like, right, like Sentomaru is the consistency tool. You can't run 5, 6, 7, 8 Sentomaru, but so we just have the Pacifista here. Next, so I was mentioning earlier about the leader ability. The leader for Crocodile, he can don -4 and return a character with a cost of 5 or less to your hand. This is actually really insane because it not only bounces the opponent's cards back, it'll also bounce your own cards back. So in order to combo with the leader Crocodile, we're playing 4 Pacifista. So you can see here that has a 5k power. So you play Pacifista, right? The combo is essentially, you imagine you have like 10 Dawn, right? So let me just count out some Dawn for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're playing 10 Dawn. We play our Pacifista. We have 4, and then we play, let's say, another Pacifista for 4, and then we'll have like 2 Dawn left over. So let's say that we already had the 2 Pacifista on here, and we use this to play 2 more Pacifista, right? So the combo here would be, since you use the 4 Pacifista or 4 Dawn to play a new Pacifista card, you can use that same 4 Dawn for the Crocodile, put it back in your deck, and then you can return the Pacifista to your hand. Why would you want to do that? Well, here's the thing. If you attack with Pacifista, he loses his blocker attribute, and he's now vulnerable to enemy attacks, right? And so these Pacifista, we're running these not necessarily because they're better at offense or defense than the other cards in our deck, but because they're really good recursively comboing with the leader Crocodile. So you can use the Crocodile ability after you attack with the Pacifista and put it back into your hand. Now in your hand, the Pacifista is going to be much more safe than it was rested on the board. And so next turn, when it comes up, you can essentially get 2 more Dawn, and then look at that, you have exactly 8 Dawn, which is enough to play exactly 2 more Pacifistas. See, really, really strong stuff. So you effectively attack with the Pacifista, get some offensive pressure off, and then you're able to recur the Pacifista and then play double the number of Pacifistas again the next turn regardless. See? So the combo is really, really potent, really strong stuff, strong synergy with the leader, and that's why we're playing Crocodile over Doflamingo, because Doflamingo would need to play a 7 Warlord card, and these Pacifista are biological weapon / navy, therefore Doflamingo synergy a little bit weak. You could make the argument Doflamingo could be okay for this next card in the deck. So we are playing 4 Bartholomew Kuma, which is a 7 Warlord, but it's not consistent enough with Doflamingo to really switch leaders off of Crocodile. I think the recursion combo with the Pacifista is a lot stronger, but because the Crocodile is putting the Pacifista in your hand, what you can also do is play the Bartholomew Kuma, who is a 4-cost 5k body, right? He's a blocker, and on KO, so this Bartholomew Kuma, you don't have to put this back in your hand with the Crocodile ability. You can save that for Pacifista, because the Bartholomew Kuma, when KO'd, will float into another Pacifista. So really strong synergy right here. It's really strong against 10-cost Kaido, because if they 10 drop and they clear your board, you just get Pacifista back, right? It forces the opponent to kind of make the decision, because it could block next turn, it could attack next turn. Really strong stat line again with the 5k power. It just naturally hits leader with no Dawn investment. Really strong. And so people will be trying to think to themselves, okay, I kind of want to get rid of this Kuma because it's a pretty good card, but a lot of times they might not end up doing that because they fear the Pacifista that it'll float into, and especially if they have no knowledge because you bounced it back with the Crocodile effect, people will be really, really hesitant to attack your Bartholomew Kuma. So it's almost kind of like an invincible body. They're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't, like clearing the Bartholomew Kuma, because again, you know, like, do they really want to deal with the tempo swing that's created by playing Pacifista? It's kind of a difficult decision, and you know, that's the kind of thing that you want your opponent to do, is you want to kind of stress out their mental stack by forcing them into really difficult decisions. So next up, I'm actually doing something a little bit controversial. Consistency in this deck, obviously we only have Sentomaru, and we have like the other Pacifista to compensate for Pacifista. And this next ratio that I have, it's a little thin. It's a little thin. Not everyone is a fan of this ratio that I'm about to introduce, but I'll give my reasoning. So obviously in this game, our deck is 50 cards. In a 50 card deck, that means that you typically want to have a more likely chance than not of seeing a specific card, right? Seeing good cards is pretty strong, and so you kind of want to have over a 50% chance. So this next ratio is a little bit thin. It's a little bit thin. I'm only playing 25 copies of Pacifista. 25 out of 50, obviously 50%. It's a little bit risky. It's a little bit coin flippy. People kind of think it's a little bit, it's a little bit controversial. People say you got to play at least 26 so you hit over the 50% threshold of consistency, because when you have a 50% card deck, each card has a 2% chance of being drawn. So if you're only playing 25 copies of a single card, you're only getting a 50% chance of top decking this card effectively, right? Personally, I feel like because your starting hand is 5 cards and you're going to have 5 life cards, your deck will actually be a bit lower than 50. So I feel like it's an acceptable number, though a little bit controversial. Like 52 versus 50, like it's not a huge difference, but I mean, math is math, right? It's objective. It doesn't really change the fact that you will or will not see cards a little bit more or a little bit less than you normally would, right? And so, but my thought process is that you're going to be taking life will get you a card, you're going to be drawing cards, and so maybe it's acceptable to only run 25 Pacifista as opposed to 26. But the reason I decided to slim this down from the more standard 26 is because I was experimenting with this other card, which was Pacifista, starter deck Pacifista. It's a 4-cost 6k body, which is, on the surface, you might think to yourself, okay, well, that's better than 5k, right? But the real thing that this is kind of doing, first of all, it hurts the consistency of the deck. I think I actually might switch this back to OPO1 Pacifista. It's just seeing this a little bit, it was a little bit sacky. It wasn't like the greatest thing in the world. I think it was like okay for when I saw it sometimes, but like when I think to myself, okay, well, what was the difference between seeing this and seeing Pacifista? I typically think that seeing Pacifista was more important than seeing Pacifista. And the other thing is that it kind of messes up with the Dawn efficiency of the deck. So normally Pacifista, you will play 2 Pacifista and then you can attach 2, and then you have 7k, right? 7k magic number forces them to play up like at least 2 cards in order to block the attack, assuming they don't have like a 4k counter event. So like the card economy right here, right? If you can put 2 Dawn onto Pacifista, which you should have because you're going to play 2 Pacifista, or even if you use the leader ability, you get 4. You just have to trash 4, and then you'll usually have a multiple of either 4 exactly cleanly. You'll use 8 Dawn, or you'll have 2 left over, or you'll use 4 or 8 Dawn every turn, and then you'll have 2 left over maybe. Right? But the problem is with this, if you want to hit this magic 700 or 7,000, you only need 1 Dawn, which on the surface seems good because you're saving it, but really that doesn't accomplish anything because the extra Dawn attached to Pacifista makes it only 6k then. And at that point, it's just kind of like, okay, you're like half committing to a strategy, but you're also not really committing to anything. This Pacifista is not even a blocker, so sometimes like you'll like put them out and they'll just swing past them and you'll just die, and it's just like, okay, well, what's even the point of you having a big number if like you're not even gonna like do much? It's a little bit cringe, but yeah, like I said, it kind of hurts the consistency of the deck. It's a little sacky. It's like pretty good, but it kind of doesn't flow with the strategy as cleanly as the other Pacifista. So I mean, Pacifista is, you can definitely cut this. I was experimenting with it. I kind of regret picking it up, to be honest, but I mean, it's fine. Like it's all right. It didn't do me too poorly. A couple of other card considerations before we wrap up the deck profile. That was the 50, and this is the leader. I just want to put out there that there's a couple other considerations that I've been hearing through the grapevine about what's optimal in this deck. And so I've seen talk about Thrust Pad Cannon. So Thrust Pad Cannon is a counter that returns a character with a cost of 3 or less to the owner's hand. So obviously the cost is pretty convenient, only a 2 cost. Again, you sometimes have 2 extra Dawn at the end of the turn. So people were thinking, okay, well, maybe this is pretty good. It has a trigger, which this deck kind of is lacking in, but I think triggers are a little bit sacky. So personally, I wouldn't really worry about that too much. But it returns a character with a cost of 3 or less to the owner's hand. So that's almost really good. It's almost really good. So obviously you can get rid of threats like Nico Robin, which this deck doesn't really struggle against anyway to begin with. It's fights against Okiku, which is pretty good. There's a couple of other cards, like there are blockers and stuff like that you can Thrust Pad Cannon, but I personally feel like the versatility of this card is a little bit too weak. I think that if this said 4, there is no owner restriction to who can use who the thrust pad cannon can target. So I feel like if this were able to be kind of like a mini crocodile, if you could send back a 4 or less, you could bump the Pacifista back to your hand, and that would be really useful. But unfortunately, it's only 3 or less. So I think that it's a little bit too situational. It's not really the greatest thing. You have enough defense as is. The counter effect here is like it's okay, but like you have so many blockers. Like, are you really worried about that? Like, obviously you could put the Sentomaru back in hand, but the reason you're playing Sentomaru is so that you can play Pacifistas for only 3 costs the turn after, right? And if you're not blocking the Sentomaru with the Pacifista, like, I don't know what you're doing, because the Sentomaru will just get you an extra Pacifista. So, like, it's like, I don't know what's going on. Like, you really shouldn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So, Thrustbed Cannon, just kind of inefficient. It's not versatile enough to play. Like, the Crocodile Leader ability is good enough because it hits a 4 cost for your own Pacifista to recur them. But this doesn't really offer you any recursion. It kind of only disrupts the opponent, which, like, I don't know why you would do that when they have to worry about the Pacifista. But, yeah, it's just a little, you know, it's not really that great. It's a little sacky, a little whatever. The other card I've seen people talk about, we obviously play the 4-cost 5k Bartholomew Kuma. I've seen some people talk about the starter deck Bartholomew Kuma because you can look at the top 3 and then reorder them, and it's only a 2-cost. But my thing is that this Bartholomew Kuma is not potent enough, right? Obviously it's only a 2-cost, which is like, it fits the curve of the deck all right, and it has a trigger to play him also. Again, triggers are a little bit sacky. I don't know how I feel about that. And you can look at the top 3 in the bottom of your deck and kind of rearrange them. But to me, I feel like, you know, despite the fact that we're playing the 1 brick right here, I feel like our deck is consistent enough to where we don't really need to stack. I feel like it's pretty easy to anticipate kind of what you get, right? Like, as you get enough experience with this deck, you kind of get a feeling for what you're going to be drawing every turn. And so I feel like this is a little bit irrelevant. You can kind of play around this through sheer player skill. And so it's kind of like whatever. It is like a cheap body, and so people were talking about, oh, well, it helps the curve of the deck go down a little bit. But it's like, I don't know. If you're playing 2 Pacifistas every turn, it's like, do you really need to, like, add the second, like, Pacifista, especially because he's only a 3k body? This is the real thing that's concerning to me. If you have a Pacifista out, you just go Pacifista and you swing. No Dawn investment at all. Every time you want to swing at leader with this Pacifista, you need to attach 2. So he is a 2 on the surface, but really, if you wanted to threaten with him, he's a 4 cost, right? So this is a huge issue because you need that Dawn to be playing more Pacifista. You need that Dawn to be attaching to make them 7k. If you're attaching 2 to make this one 5k, you'll spend 2 on the first turn. You'll spend 2 on the next turn to attack. And if he survives that turn to attack again, you're spending another 2. So you're spending 6 for 2 5k swings? That just doesn't make sense. Why would you not just play 2? Why would you not just pay 2 after you pay the 4? You pay 6 with this Pacifista and you swing for 7. Right? If you swing 3 times with this card, you're just wasting 2 more Dawn. And if you swing again with this card, it's free, right? So it's a short-term investment that doesn't net you long-term benefit, which is why we have to cut this Bartholomew Kuma. Unfortunately, that's kind of the only real other cards that are really viable in this deck, I would say, that you could really consider. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if I had to make any changes, obviously this Pacifista, you might want to go for the 26 Pacifista. Kind of like, it's a little bricky, it's a little, you know, I was just experimenting, you know, maybe if the ratios were a little bit different, it could make sense. But, you know, for the most part, that's kind of how we're playing this deck. Thank you guys for watching my deck profile. Leave me your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you have your own blue crocodile deck, please let me know how it's treating you. And just, you know, if you need to copy my deck, don't feel ashamed. I understand it's hard to optimize things, and I obviously have a pretty close to optimal list. The only thing I'd change, again, Pacifista to the Pacifista. But I mean, yeah, let me know how you guys felt about this video. Let me know how you felt about the deck profile, and if you see success with this deck at your local, please let me know in the comments. Thanks you guys for joining me today, and I'll see you guys next time.